Chicago Blackhawks held their exit interviews over the weekend, and on today's episode, I'll go through all of the notable comments made by Connor Bedard, Alex Vlasic, and general manager Kyle Davidson. Plus, I'll also dish out my end-of-the-season awards for Team MVP, Biggest Surprise, and Unsung Hero. All that and plenty more right here on Locked On Blackhawks.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome on into another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can go and find me on X at JackBushman2. And make sure to also go and give a follow to my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey. So that way you can get all of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. And also, quick reminder to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you're watching right here, right now on YouTube, it really does help me out tremendously. And if you're a frequent audio listener of the podcast, make sure to be downloading all of those latest episodes. Keep getting those bad boys in the queue. It really does help me out as well. You can also go and rate and review the podcast if you like what you're hearing on a day-to-day basis. And last but certainly not least, got to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get $150 worth of bonus bets guaranteed. All right, good morning, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. As I mentioned a little bit on the show yesterday, the Blackhawks held their exit interviews over the weekend following their season coming to a close with a little bit of a brutal 4-3 overtime loss to the Los Angeles Kings on Thursday night. But what I wanted to kick off today's show with is all the notable comments that were made during these exit interviews by a couple of different players. And as I also alluded to on yesterday's show, wanted to make sure to reiterate this first and foremost here to kick things off today, because I do think it was probably the most notable tidbit out of the exit interviews is what general manager Kyle Davidson had to say. And basically just said he realizes now is the time for the Blackhawks to start making moves forward, to start ascending. And they might not be playoff contenders next year. I think that's still a little bit far-fetched given that we don't expect them to be making the biggest splashes in the offseason. And it feels like, yes, they're going to be making improvements, but it doesn't seem like they're going to be shelling out enough money to make, the major improvements required to go and win 40 games to get in the playoffs when this team only won 23 out of 82 this season. So the playoffs, as much as I want the Blackhawks to get back to playing at the most meaningful time of the year, I don't think that's going to be happening next season, but it's certainly the time to be starting to build up. They can't finish, as Davidson said himself, they can't finish in the bottom three in the league again next year, and that's rather refreshing to hear because these last couple of seasons have just been so testing for us Blackhawks fans. This year in particular, though, did not envision it being worse than what the Blackhawks put out on the ice last season. They had 59 points last year, only 52 this season. Yeah, it's unacceptable. It's been a lot of bad hockey since Kyle Davidson has taken over. And, that was part of the plan. The Blackhawks have implemented this very patient approach, but it's nice to hear him recognize that, yeah, it's time to start moving forward. It's time to start bettering ourselves. And it's time to start changing the standard around here. That's really what kind of stood out to me as well. Davidson saying the standard has to be raised, the expectation has to be raised, and through that, accountability will be raised as well. That's the nature of the path we're on, and eventually we have to start making positive steps, and I think we've reached that point, and I certainly agree. I really think just given also all the talent that's starting to step onto the scene, both at the NHL level and at the AHL level, and there's only going to be a bigger influx of players coming through these next few years, given the draft picks that the Hawks have made over the last couple of years, and also the plethora of picks that they still have in their back pocket moving forward. So yes, for a magnitude and multitude of different reasons, it is time to start moving forward. I would really like to see this Blackhawks team win something around 30 to 35 games next year. I think that's a reasonable improvement. So excited to see what Kyle Davidson is going to do this offseason in order to make that happen, because it is time. And I think another year like the Blackhawks just had is really, really, really going to test the patience of this fan base. And credit to all the Blackhawks fans for still showing out to the United Center all year long, even though this team was dog water. Something Seth Jones mentioned in his exit interview. He gives a lot of credit to the Blackhawks fans. He was pretty surprised that the attendance was what it was. So another congratulations and a tip of the cap to all the Blackhawks greats out there. But aside from Kyle Davidson recognizing and saying that he wants this Blackhawks team to be better next season, which is music to my ears, and I'm sure a lot of fans' ears out there as well, I thought it's also notable what Connor Bedard is going to be up to this offseason as well. Based on, I would say he exceeded the expectations as a rookie. I know he didn't hit that point per game margin, and the goal scoring maybe wasn't what we had hoped for, particularly at the end of the season when it kind of seemed like he ran out of gas there in his first pro campaign, going on the professional grind for the first time in his career. That'll happen. But in terms of what Connor Bedard is going to be working on this offseason, or his main focal points in training, first of all, he's going to be going back to his hometown of Vancouver for a majority of the summer, playing with practicing and training with a good group of guys up there, including Ryan Nugent-Hopkins from the Edmonton Oilers. But he said he really wants to work on his speed and getting more explosive and getting stronger to help him win some battles. And I think that's all right on par for Connor Bedard. The speed is already pretty darn good. Like, the pace that he can play at in transition is what makes him really special, along with all of his abilities. And I do think he exceeded expectations this year, but there are clearly some areas that he has to work on. And, you know, it's tough when he was kind of having to be the head honcho for the Blackhawks all season long, right? Clearly their best player, which is tough for an undersized 18-year-old at the center position. But getting stronger certainly will help him on the defensive side of things too, being a little bit stronger on his stick, on the forecheck, not turning the puck over as often. I think those are all things that he does have to work on a little bit. And getting more explosive, that's a scary thought. As Nick Foligno put it in his exit interview, an improved Connor Bedard is certainly a scary thought. And you know this kid is going to be putting in the work all offseason long. He's an absolute rink rat. He eats, breathes, and sleeps hockey. So excited to see what Connor Bedard is going to look like. Maybe not the next time he hits the ice at the World Championship, because based on what he said in his exit interview, it sounds like he's going to want to do some relaxing here this offseason after I don't know how much relaxing he's actually going to do, but in his words, in his mind, some relaxing. But it's just been a whirlwind for him over the last year or two, right? With all the media and the coverage going up to the NHL draft and throughout his rookie season, the media circus that he was on, all eyes being on him. It sounds like he wants to go unwind and get out of the limelight, if you will, a little bit in Vancouver this summer, but we will see him back in action, it sounds like, for the World Championship. He hasn't 100% committed because he does still want to see how his body feels after the grueling NHL regular season, but I would expect him to be there for Team Canada. It sounds like all the expectations are to have him in Prague representing Canada in just a couple of weeks' time, but a lot of things for Connor Bedard to work on, even crazy as that sounds, how special a rookie season he had. There is room for improvement, absolutely. It's mostly surrounding around getting stronger and just harder in battles and all that stuff as an undersized center. That's what he's got to work on. Connor Bedard going to be back in his hometown of Vancouver for a majority of the summer. Another noteworthy quote coming out of the exit interviews, maybe the most noteworthy other than Kyle Davidson's comments, if I'm being honest, was what Tyler Johnson had to say. He said, I'm obviously thankful for being here. I've met a lot of good people, but wasn't exactly like I envisioned or wanted. And he's a UFA this summer. Sounds like he's going to want to be playing meaningful hockey once again. And, you know, you can't really blame him. The guy's going to be turning 34 years old here in July. Didn't get any sniff of it whatsoever during his time here in Chicago. That was also plagued by injuries. There were a lot of battles within the battle for Tyler Johnson. So I certainly understand those comments and the frustrations based on, 3 years of really bad hockey here in Chicago after getting traded from the Tampa Bay Lightning, who were just having tons of success year in and year out. And even though his role got diminished a little bit, he was still a real big focal part of that. So I don't blame him for wanting to get back to playing, for a contender somewhere, given he's at the latter stages of his career probably, and he is coming off a rather sharp season. His best certainly here in Chicago was 17 goals and 14 assists for 31 points in 67 games, the healthiest he's been since he's been in Chicago. Wishing nothing but the best for Tyler Johnson. He was really good this season, I thought. I wish it went a little bit better for him in his time with the Blackhawks, but that's just kind of the nature of the beast. Interested to see what he's going to be doing as a UFA, but made it pretty clear he's not going to be coming back to the Blackhawks. Alex Vlasic, I thought, also had some notable comments saying, he loves playing for his hometown team. He thinks it's really cool that he gets this experience and he wants to be here as long as possible. He said his agent is well aware of that matter, and it seems only natural for him and the Blackhawks to get some sort of deal done here this offseason, whether it be, 3 or 4 year bridge deal or one of those long-term, like 6 or 7 year contracts that we've seen some depth defensemen get over the last couple of years. Matthias Samuelsson for Buffalo signed a 7-year deal around $4 million. I think that's kind of a fair comparison, right around $4 million for Alex Vlasic long-term. I think makes a lot of sense, but I'm going to dictate a whole episode here this offseason based on Alex Vlasic contract discussion. So not going to go into anything on that too heavy right here, right now, but he is in RFA here this summer, but sounds like there's going to be no issues between those two sides in getting the deal done. And speaking of getting a deal done, going to be interesting to see if Colin Blackwell and the Blackhawks reach an agreement here this summer, as Blackwell also is an unrestricted free agent. He said in his exit interview he would love to be back with Chicago, but at this point in time isn't exactly sure what the team is thinking yet as he heads into the offseason. I'm sure there will be some discussions had from afar, not thinking about numbers or anything or strategic positions for certain players or even the roster for next year. Colin Blackwell's a good energy guy that you would like to have back. And when he was healthy this year, he was effective, 8 goals and 2 assists for 10 points in 44 games worth of action. Really good defensive forward that can kind of give you a little bit of everything. Was really solid with Joey Anderson and Jason Dickinson on that shutdown trio for the Blackhawks that would nightly go up against the opposition's top line. And just the heart and the effort and the energy level that he brings, you can win with Colin Blackwell's. The problem is he's a little bit older. He's been injury plagued in his time here with Chicago. Those are things that are going to weigh into the Blackhawks decision. And you also got to consider all the other UFAs that the Blackhawks have in their forward group and the slew of forwards that are going to be coming up to the show in the next couple of years. Is there going to be room for Colin Blackwell? Do you risk giving him money when he could just get hurt? I would probably be willing to give him a short-term, cheap kind of another prove-it deal for Blackwell just because he only played 44 games this year. But I also recognize the situation that the Blackhawks have as an organization. So I'll dive into everything, all the Blackhawks, UFAs, RFAs, those decisions. I'll get into them a little bit more. But I do think Colin Blackwell is a guy that out of all the UFAs and RFAs, you can point to him and say that guy brought it night in and night out and probably deserves it more so than some others. We'll see what ends up happening there, but that's everything of note that came out of the Blackhawks exit interviews over the weekend. Coming up in just a moment here, Blackhawks fans, I still have to dish out my end of the season awards, including team MVP, most improved player, and the Blackhawks Unsung Hero. But first, I got to talk to you all about the fine folks over at FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and the NHL. Baseball's also in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every single game because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. You heard me right. $150, $150 worth of bonus bets. Whether you win or lose, it's guaranteed. It's just you deposit some money, you deposit $5, you go and get $150 worth of bonus bets into your account, win or lose. And you can bet on everything with those bonus bets, from slap shots throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs to home runs across all the major league ballparks to slam dunks on the way to the NBA championship, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Go and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon right now and make your first bet an automatic win. Again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon to get $150 worth of bonus bets if you're a new customer. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. I also got to talk to you about Policygenius. With Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million worth of coverage. And some options offer same-day approval and also help avoid unnecessary medical exams. And Policygenius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace that helps you save both time and money so you can provide your family with a financial safety net starting right here today. Go and talk to a team of award-winning agents who will walk you through the entire process step by step along your side, comparing quotes from America's top insurers in just a few clicks to get you the best and lowest prices. And Policygenius is a trustworthy marketplace with thousands of 5-star reviews on both Google and Trustpilot from customers who found the best fit for their needs. Go and check life insurance off of your to-do list in no time with Policygenius. Head on over to policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL, or you can simply go and click the link in the description down below to get your free life insurance quotes today and see how much you could be saving. Again, that's policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL. The Locked On NFL mock draft is available right here, right now. Make sure to check it out before the action begins later on this week. You can go and find the ultimate 6-episode series on Locked On NFL Draft to hear who the local Locked On experts are picking for every NFL franchise, with live reactions from local college football experts and even the fantasy football angle. The Locked On NFL mock draft is available now on Locked On NFL Draft. Find it on YouTube or also wherever you may listen to your podcasts. Segment 2, time to get into my end of the season awards. A little bit of a fun segment to lighten up the mood on today's show. Not a whole lot of fun conversations that have been had surrounding the Chicago Blackhawks team for the last couple of months, but I think that's really going to change here on the show now that we're in the offseason. And quite honestly, with the Blackhawks just playing such putrid hockey over the last 3 years, the offseasons have really been like the most fun part, other than getting to watch Connor Bedard and Alex Vlasic, Frank Nazar blossom right in front of my eyes. My favorite parts have been all these offseason conversations, the hypotheticals, the top 10 prospect lists, the who the Blackhawks are going to get in free agency, what's going to happen with their UFAs, RFAs, building the lineup for next season, taking a look at the prospect pool, getting into draft profiles, all that fun stuff. Really good offseason conversations. Going to be having Charlie Romeliotis back on the show here sometime soon. Hadi Kalakesh from Locked On NHL Prospects is going to be coming on as well ahead of the draft lottery. Wanting to get a conversation in with JD Young from Locked On Sharks, as our two teams are both hoping to secure that #1 pick in the 2024 NHL draft. A lot of good offseason coverage coming right here on the Locked On Blackhawks YouTube channel. Make sure to go and hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already, so you don't miss out on any of that action. But yeah, segment 2 here today, getting into my Chicago Blackhawks end of the season awards. I actually had a pretty fun time going through all of these. I went with the same awards that I dished out during the midway point of the regular season back in January. I want to say it was when I dished out my midseason awards. I had to think hard about a lot of these because for most of the categories, I felt like there were at least 2 deserving recipients, which is kind of funny given the Blackhawks didn't have a lot of success this year. You think this would be a little bit cut and dry, but I actually had a little bit of a difficult time kind of diving through all of these. First and foremost, first award, I think the most notable team award is Team MVP. Yeah, this one was a toughie for me right off the rip, and maybe I kind of copped out a little bit here, but I promise this is the only one that I did this with. I gave out co-MVPs because to me, they were just synonymous with one another, synonymous with any sort of success the Chicago Blackhawks had this year. Peter Mrazek and Connor Bedard, I think, are absolutely deserving of being co-MVPs for the Blackhawks. For Connor Bedard, he was the leader offensively for this team all season long, played in 62 of the 82 games, and in those 14 that he missed, you sure felt his absence. I mean, even with Bedard, this Blackhawks offense was the worst or near the bottom of the NHL all year long. Without him, I mean, it felt like it was trouble to even score one single goal. So yeah, you could see the impact that Connor Bedard had when he was in there based on being their leading scorer. And also when he wasn't in the lineup, you could tell how badly the Blackhawks missed him. And in those 68 games that he played, he scored 22 goals, which tied Jason Dickinson for the team lead, led all rookies, also added 39 assists, which led all Blackhawks, tied with Brock Faber for the most among all rookies, and then led all rookies as well with 61 points, also leading the Blackhawks. He had 18 even strength goals, so it wasn't like he was a power play merchant like some other rookies out there, not going to be naming any names, but did a lot of his best work at 5-on-5, second to only Jason Dickinson in that category. And he also averaged 19 minutes and 47 seconds of time on ice, most among all rookie forwards, most among forwards on the Blackhawks, and fourth on the team, just behind Connor Murphy by 3 seconds. Connor Bedard was getting pumped out there more and more as the season went on, as he got more comfortable and more familiar. Luke Richardson obviously trusted him more and more and just gave him a bigger and bigger role. And he was regularly over 20 minutes in the second half of the season. So Bedard was the head honcho offensively for the Blackhawks, but I can't leave out Peter Mrazek because I really don't even want to think about how bad this Blackhawks team would have been without him. Like, envision the Chicago Blackhawks with Arvid Soderblom as their starter. It's a scary thought. And Peter Mrazek was in net for 18 of the team's 23 wins this year. They only won 5 games all year long without Peter Mrazek in net. 18, 31, and 4. Yeah, not, an ideal win-loss record, but with the team in front of him, there was nothing he could really do, and all of the underlying numbers were really solid. A 3.05 goals against average. Really would have loved if the Blackhawks defense could have helped him out a little bit more down the stretch to gotten that below 3, but he still had a really solid 907 save percentage. Anything above 900 on this Blackhawks team with the amount of shots that Peter Mrazek was facing night in and night out. That's really impressive. Also recorded his first shutout as a member of the Blackhawks. And recorded the 9th most starts in the NHL after really having been plagued by injuries each of the last 2 to 3 seasons. To be 9th in the NHL in starts, to have to be ridden by Luke Richardson the way that he was, given Arvid Soderblom's struggles, I think is rather incredible. Peter Mrazek basically had to stand on his head night in and night out. If he didn't, the Blackhawks essentially had 0 shot of winning. And I thought this was an interesting stat as well. Only one time this year did Peter Mrazek get a win when allowing more than 3 goals. One time this year, he got a win when allowing more than 3 goals. So he had to be sturdy because the Blackhawks just didn't give him a ton of run support. If he wasn't on his A game, it was hard pressed to see the Blackhawks coming away with a win. Again, don't want to think about how bad this Blackhawks team would have been without Peter Mrazek. Absolutely deserving of being the co-MVP this year, along with Connor Bedard. Go and comment down below if you had to pick one of those two, Bedard or Peter Mrazek, to be the team MVP. Who are you giving it to? Really interested to hear what you all have to say. Honestly, if I had to pick, I think I'd probably lean towards Mrazek just because I think his impact, you can make an argument that it was more meaningful than Connor Bedard's, but really interested to see what all you listeners and viewers have to say on that matter. Next up, we have most improved player. I'm going to be going with Alex Vlasic. I think this was a pretty easy one with the ascensions that he made in his game. Even he said during his exit interview that he thought he exceeded expectations this year. And really, really flashed the upside that he could be a top pairing defenseman in this league for a long, long time. Hell, he was already that as a rookie still this year for the Chicago Blackhawks, essentially. 76 games, 2 goals, 14 assists for 16 points. I thought offensively he made strides. The speed, certainly, I thought got a lot better in terms of carrying the puck out of the defensive zone and also just being able to contribute on the offensive side of things. I thought his offensive IQ went up this year as well, and to only be a -4 on this Blackhawks team, averaging 21 minutes and 29 seconds per game of time on ice, really, really stellar. And go and look at all the underlying numbers. Alex Vlasic was a stud in a really difficult role, playing, big time minutes right out of the gate. Yeah, I'm super excited with the future of Alex Vlasic. I was already excited about his future before the season, even more excited about it now based on what I saw. Absolutely, he has to be the most improved player, and I think he has to be the Norris for the Blackhawks as well. Seth Jones, I do think was really solid this year along with Alex Vlasic, but for Vlasic to do what he did, given how much younger and more inexperienced he is than Seth Jones, I mean, basically being just as good, if not better, at least on the defensive side of things. Obviously, Seth is more capable offensively than Alex Vlasic is or ever will be. But defensively, it feels like Alex Vlasic is already the anchor of this Blackhawks team, in my opinion. So I went and gave him the Norris Trophy Award as well over Seth Jones, along with being the most improved player this season. Next up, we have the Unsung Hero. And this one I kind of had to think about as well. But I ended up giving it to Ryan Donato because I kind of think he was the unsung hero of the Blackhawks this year. I think Nick Foligno certainly is in that boat. I actually think Joey Anderson is deserving of it as well. But Ryan Donato quietly played in the second most games for the Blackhawks this year, 78. Only Jason Dickinson played in more. He had 12 goals, added 18 assists, which is a career high, 30 points, second most of his NHL career, averaged 14 minutes of time on ice, which is the most he's had in a season since 2018-19. And he had a bunch of different roles, and he was effective in most of them. Like, sure, he didn't make his presence felt night in and night out, but he's truly a bottom six type of player. But when he got opportunities on the top line with Connor Bedard, I thought he looked sharp, and actually the underlying numbers support that theory. And even in a bottom six role, I thought he was really, really, really solid and was a good contributor from someone who didn't have a consistent spot in the lineup. It felt like he never let that kind of derail things too bad. So I was impressed with Ryan Donato. I thought his work ethic was really solid, and he was kind of utilized in a boatload of different ways this season. Really solid stuff out of Ryan Donato in 78 games. Going to be back with the Blackhawks next year. Next up, we have the hardest worker. This was a little bit of a toughie too. I ended up giving it to Colin Blackwell, even though he only played in 44 games. Like I said, the energy, the hustle, the effort, he left it all on the ice. Like a guy that wears his emotions on his sleeve. He gave it all he had night in and night out, and I really respect that out of Colin Blackwell in a selfless role, going out there and having to block shots, be physical, play defensive-minded hockey, and still chipped in for 8 goals this season, and just feels like a guy that was probably beloved by all his teammates for the sacrifices that he would make, everything that he had to go through to get back on the ice. The injury obviously kept him out for a lot longer than anyone anticipated, but when he got back in the lineup, it looked like you could tell like how much he had missed hockey and just how much he was enjoying that moment. It was really awesome to see out of Colin Blackwell. He brought the effort every single night, so I ended up giving Blackwell the hardest worker award this season. Rookie of the year, could make an argument between Alex Vlasic and Connor Bedard, but I think it obviously has to go to Bedsy for everything that he did, being the top line center, being the leading point getter, the leading goal scorer, the leading assist guy. He was the Chicago Blackhawks this year, basically, so I think you have to give him the Rookie of the Year. Next up, we have Best Defensive Forward, a good one here. Jason Dickinson, though, is the clear-cut nominee for this one, and I quietly think he's turned into one of the better defensive forwards in the entire league. Not only did he burst out offensively this year for career highs across the board, 22 goals, 35 points, career highs. He was also a +4 while averaging 16 minutes and 34 seconds of time on ice. That's a career high for him. +4 on this Blackhawks team is really, really impressive given the role that he had. Also won 50% of his faceoffs, which was a career high, added 143 hits, career high as well, 54 takeaways, 73 block shots, add in the 20 even strength goals on top of it. The way that he was effective on both sides of the ice for the Blackhawks this year was simply incredible. Super happy for Jason Dickinson, absolutely deserving of the extension. And I really do hope he sneaks in a couple of Selke Trophy votes this year because he absolutely deserved it for what he did for the Blackhawks this year. He was phenomenal. Biggest surprise, you could go with Jason Dickinson. I'm going to go with Philip Kurashev, though, for a guy that his previous career best was 25 points last season. I did not see him having this type of year, or this type of success with Connor Bedard. I figured this would have been the chemistry that Bedard and Taylor Hall or would establish with one another. But with Taylor Hall missing a majority of the season, that kind of opened things up for some other guys to get a chance. And Philip Kurashev, boy, did he make the most of it, man. I'm still not sold on him necessarily being a top 6 guy of the future on a Stanley Cup contending team, but man, there are certainly more capabilities possible than I imagined this time last year going into last offseason. So a lot of credit deserved to Philip Kurashev for stepping up, making the most of his opportunity this season, and not letting it just be a little blip. Like, he was really solid all year long after missing some time early on in the season. He stepped into the lineup and was effective immediately and kept that going all season long. Huge shout out to Philip Kurashev. He was the biggest surprise to me this year. Biggest disappointment, I'm going to go with Taylor Radish, man. Only 5 goals and 9 assists for 14 points. Despite playing in 73 games this year, he had 37 points the year prior and was a 20-goal scorer, of course. Only had 3 even-strength goals on the season and added just 1 power play goal. He had 7 the year prior. He only shot 4.2%, believe it or not. And he only took 9 fewer shots than he had last season. He was a 15.5% shooter. I knew that was going to be a little bit tough for him to replicate. Never envisioned Taylor Radish struggling this much. It seemed like literally through all 73 games, he had terrible puck luck. He couldn't buy a break. Whenever he had a good scoring opportunity, he'd miss the net, or a stick would break, or he'd fan on the shot. Like, the guy legitimately could not get a bounce this season. And now, because of that, you have to wonder what the Blackhawks are going to be doing with him as he's a restricted free agent. Undoubtedly, I think Taylor Radish was the biggest disappointment for the Blackhawks this year. And last, but certainly not least, a fun little one that I have here, the biggest Blackhawks legend. Who's going to be remembered as a Blackhawks legend from their time in Chicago this year? 2 guys. Rem Pitlick in 9 games worth of action, no goals, no assists, no points, Blackhawks legend. And Zach Sanford, big shout out to Zach Sanford, 4 assists in 18 games worth of action, never found the back of the net. 2 Blackhawks legends right there in Rem Pitlick and Zach Sanford. All right, there are my Chicago Blackhawks 2024 end of the season awards coming up in just a moment here. I know we're running a little bit long, but I still have to get into my better late than never preview of the Stanley Cup playoffs. But first, I got to talk to you all about Game Time. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to the next ball game you want to attend. And I'm happy to announce that Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Plus, prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. And with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. And I personally have used Game Time since I was back in high school, going and seeing Jonathan Taves, Patrick Kane, and all those Blackhawks greats during the Dynasty era. And I still use Game Time here today, going to see Connor Bedard at the UC, or when I'm making trips to Wrigley during the summertime, and even when I'm traveling in another city and want to go and see a comedy show with one of my friends, or want to go and check out a concert. I always make sure to check out Game Time first, because it's the cheapest, fastest, and easiest way for you to purchase all of your tickets, not just tickets to Major League Baseball games. But you can go and take advantage of the deal right now. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps when you download the Game Time app and create an account, and you'll get $20 off with your first purchase. I highly recommend you go and check it out right now. Again, use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps to get $20 off to see Seiya Suzuki play at Wrigley Field this season. All you got to do is download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed, Game Time. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Again, make sure to like, comment, subscribe if you're still watching right here, right now on YouTube for today's episode. I really appreciate all of your support. And also, make sure to go and check out the new Locked On Sports Today, because Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. So make sure to go and check out Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Segment 3, I know the Stanley Cup playoffs are already underway. They began on Saturday afternoon. I'm recording this here on Tuesday morning. All of the series have already begun, and I apologize for that, but I thought better late than never. I do want to get into my preview of all the series going on around the Stanley Cup playoffs, as well as my predictions and who I think is going to be meeting head-to-head in the Stanley Cup final and who's going to be hoisting the cup when it's all said and done and all that good stuff. I know we're running a little bit late here, so might go through this a little bit quickly, but starting out in the Western Conference, we have the Dallas Stars and the Vegas Golden Knights in a huge heavyweight tilt in the first round. Game 1 last night certainly did not disappoint, but Vegas was able to come away with a win on the road early, which could be really huge for them. My prediction, though, I have the Dallas Stars in 7 games. Then another banger of a first-round series out west. The Winnipeg Jets, Connor Hellebuyck led, taking on the Colorado Avalanche, the 2022 Stanley Cup champions who are trying to get back there. I have Colorado winning this one in 7, but I expect it to be a very good series. I expect Connor Hellebuyck to be able to steal some games. And how about Winnipeg coming out in game 1? Then we have Vancouver versus Nashville. The Preds, even though, yes, they were steaming hot in the second half of the season, and this was their best year that they've had in the last handful of seasons, still feel like they're a little bit in limbo. They put up a good fight against Vancouver in game 1, but ultimately, I just think the Canucks offense is going to be too much. I have the Canucks taking this one in 6 games. And then the last series out in the West, the Edmonton Oilers taking on the Los Angeles Kings for the 3rd straight year in the playoffs. A great rivalry that's kind of been created because of that fact. I have the Edmonton Oilers taking this one in 6 games as well. Zach Hyman with a hat trick last night. Connor McDavid with 5 assists. Looks like he's going to be a man on the mission for Edmonton. To me, it all comes down to Stuart Skinner. I don't know if they're going to be able to have the goaltending and defense to win it all, but I do think they're going to be able to best Los Angeles here in 6 games. And then moving out east, we have the Florida Panthers versus the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Battle of Florida in the first round, baby. It is another bopper. I have the Florida Panthers winning this one in 6 games. They managed to take game 1 over the weekend against the Lightning. I think that's going to be a really close series, and I think Tampa's experience could get them over the hump. I still feel like the end of their dynasty, though, I feel like it's kind of there. And I feel like Florida is a team that's really hungry after getting so close last year. They have the experience, had some good teams recently, and it just feels like they're kind of the team that's trending up while the Lightning are trending in the other direction, in my opinion. So I have Florida in 6. Boston versus Toronto. My, oh my, what a first couple of games of this series, as it's now even at 1 apiece after the Leafs were able to take game 2 last night. A huge late goal out of Austin Matthews, who potted 69 in the regular season. I'm sorry, Toronto. Hate to do it. I just can't pick you, man. Just can't do it. I'm going with the Boston Bruins in 7 games. Heartbreaker again for the Maple Leafs. The New York Rangers versus the Washington Capitals. I just think Washington's going to be outgunned. Charlie Lindgren, a guy who's never had playoff experience, I believe, I think is just going to be asked to do a whole lot to take down this Rangers team. I have the Rangers in 5. And then Carolina versus New York. Oh, my, oh, my. Carolina overcoming a 3-0 deficit last night, scoring twice in 9 seconds to go from down 3-2 to up 4-3 with under 2.5 minutes to play. That felt like it was a real opportunity for New York to get back into that series and get some momentum going home. Now it's going to seem like they have the weight of the world on their shoulders to go and get both of them. I think they're going to split in New York. I think Carolina comes back home and beats them in 5 games. So that's what I have in the opening round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. As far as the second round, I have Dallas taking down the Colorado Avalanche in 7 games. I have the Edmonton Oilers besting the Vancouver Canucks in 5. I think it's going to be a statement out of McJesus, Draisaitl, and the Oilers. I have Boston taking down the Florida Panthers in a little bit of revenge after blowing a 3-1 lead. I think they're going to close it out in 6 this year. And I also think Carolina is really on the right track right now. I think they're going to steamroll through the New York Rangers in 5 games. Call me crazy. That's what I got. In the Stanley Cup Conference Finals, I have the Dallas Stars taking down the Edmonton Oilers in 6 games. I had them meeting in my conference final last year. I had Dallas making the Stanley Cup. They came just shy of that. I have them getting back to it this year. I just love their defense. I love the goaltending. I believe in them. And then out east, I have the Boston Bruins striking for their revenge, taking down the Carolina Hurricanes in a classic series, winning in 7 games. Dallas versus Boston in the Stanley Cup final. I'm going with the Dallas Stars in 6 games, which is a little bit scary considering they dropped game 1 of the opening round to Vegas on home ice last night. It's going to be tough for them to take down the defending Stanley Cup champs, but I think whoever wins that series is going back to the Stanley Cup. You heard me first. There's my Stanley Cup predictions. That's going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, thank you all again for tuning into the show. Be sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free right now, wherever you may be listening to your podcast, and to go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. And that way you can get the latest episode as soon as it's available on YouTube each and every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Follow me on X at Jack Bushman2, and also go and check out my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey as well. So that way you can get all of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. So until tomorrow's episode, everyone, enjoy the rest of your Tuesdays. Be safe. I'll catch you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.